You've got to get your own process. Matt, you've got a process. Other people that you talk to, you can go and you can learn and we can educate and we can tell you, but ultimately at the end of the day, you have to get your own process, the one that you feel comfortable with that helps you go.
What's kind of been your strategy as it relates to financing these, finding them, and maybe talk a little bit about your perception of risk when, with all of this?
Yeah. So I'm going to introduce to you Lindsay and I, and she probably won't say this, but we have a process, and I kind of took that, those University of Utah football fans that are out there, Kyle Whittingham will tell you, respect the process. And there's a process that they follow. And Lindsay and I have developed that process, and it continues to morph and get better each year. But we have a process, and that's kind of the message that I would share to everyone is you've got to get your own process. Matt, you've got a process. Other people that you talk to, you can go and you can learn and we can educate and we can tell you, but ultimately at the end of the day, you have to get your own process, the one that you feel comfortable with that helps you go. And so as Lindsay and I were kind of young into this and still understanding, here I am trying to go through schooling, working a full-time job, but at the same time, you only have two hands, right? Your two hands can only do so much work. And that's what I was doing, grinding every day, going to work. But at the same time, I needed to have other hands on the outside that were working for me 24/7, 365 days a year. And that's where real estate comes in, right? The rental properties, they're always working for you. Whether you're on vacation or not doing humanitarian stuff, they're always working for you. And so early on in the process, we started looking, okay, we're going to rent this. We consulted with some people. We looked at what the market was. You get your first renter in there. And the goal with the very first house was, and this is where I think a lot of people make mistakes, is the moment they get their first rental property or they start to do that, you change your mindset and you think, oh my goodness, I'm cash flowing $200, $50, whatever it is that you have, $1,000. That Tesla that I wanted, I can now make the monthly down payments on. Well, guess what? You forget that when the renter's out or it gets destroyed or there's math or you have to do something in there, now you have to make the mortgage plus your Tesla payment plus everything else. Yep. So we made very early on in our process that we would never touch the money that came from the rental properties. It was to continue to go a different direction and build the empire. And my full-time job is what we would live and work on. So the rental properties would then grow and develop. And then once we got to a certain point where taxes and all this other stuff came in, then we had to start being smart with what we were doing. So the first rental property, the first couple of years, again, we started slow. You just build up a nest egg. And then once we got to a certain point that there was cash in there, we then used the money from that first rental property that was saved in the bank, became the down payment for the second property. And then all of a sudden, go ahead.
Just to pause you, I think kind of like we talked about at the beginning, like I think you guys have done phenomenally well while being, full-time, a regular job. But sometimes having that full-time job with the W-2 income is actually an advantage, right? Because like you just said, you don't have to rely on the real estate money for the day-to-day, right? I've talked about this before, but I kind of was the opposite when I started. The real estate money, not necessarily rentals, but like real estate activities was what was kind of the paycheck, right? Yeah, so right. Sometimes I was always, and I still find myself in this mode of like, no, it's just the quick money. But it's the long money that's going to make you super wealthy and build that empire. And so it sometimes is, if you have the risk profile on the team, like you're talking about, and the partners, it maybe can be an advantage to have that W-2 income right along the way. So
yeah, and you're right. And it works for people, right? This is what worked for us. And some people, you're right, you can go. And if you put all your time and effort into making that successful, it's going to be successful. So if you want to, because how are you going to feed the family? How are you going to pay the bills if you don't have a W-2 income that's coming through? That was just the route that we took. Yes. And it took a little bit longer. You look at it, we probably could have built, our process was in place. We could have built it faster, but we just did it that way because that's what worked for us.
I love this. So keep talking about your process.
So you look at that, we had the income, then we were able to come and get the second house. And that's where we were introduced to you. And then you helped us get that second. And when we look at it, I have an Excel sheet that my wife and I use that we go through that we're able to quickly evaluate a property, and it gives us what, at the end of the day, our cash flow is going to be. What is the cash flow at the end of the day? And when we first started this, we kind of looked at it and said, okay, you start with a low number. We have to make at least X amount of dollars to make this be okay for us to do. And that first initial, number set was $200. We thought, hey, if we could, cash flow $200, then we were okay. You look at that now, and $200 to some people, you're better off to get a part-time job at McDonald's or something like that than take the risk of renters calling you 24/7, doing different things for $200, a month. But you don't realize the appreciation, everything else that comes with owning that house. And after a few years, things start to change. And so that was kind of the process that we looked at. And as we continued to grow, now you look at this, we have 2 single family homes that are now dumping money into a pot, right? And if you go back to the process that we were respecting, that we were observing, the goal was you never touch any of the money that comes from this. We live our life off of the W-2 income. Other hands are working for us 24/7. Now you have 2 income properties that are dumping money in there. Well, you let a year or 2 go by, all of a sudden you have enough money for what? Another down payment for a property. And at that point, then you go and purchase another property. And then what do? Now you have 3 properties, and then it kind of goes, up from there. And you look at that process and go. And then in between there, obviously there were partnerships that came up, understanding, how do you leverage, how do you go with other people? And that's where we came in with you, and we were able to help with that process, and it works.